Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Krzysztof Kozłowski, and it's nice to see all of you on our next webinar. Paul Van Boekholt will present. I see 12 people present. Maybe we can wait a few minutes for next participants. I think till 7:10. Do you agree?
No problem.
No problem, Paul. Okay, very good. Yeah, this is today is nice weather in Poland, so maybe this is difficult to join this webinar. Instead to stay on the beach.
I see that it's people from Poland and also partly people from the Netherlands.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm from Belgium.
From Belgium.
Yes.
Also good.
I was hesitating to mention it, Kees. Close to the border.
Oh, yeah. We have still 13 participants. The number of participants is still 13. Okay, so I think we can slowly start with our webinar today. This is a pleasure to have Paul Van Boekholt, business manager of Northern Europe from the company HUBBARD POLSKA Limited. Paul will present a very interesting subject about slow-growing broilers, but I don't like to describe this in more details. I hope, I think Paul will do this better than me. So, Paul, could you start with your presentation?
Yes, thank you very much. I will do my best, and
Good.
you've given me quite some time, so I don't feel pressed too much. So that's good, because normally it's limited to 10, 15 minutes or 20, but I suggest that we keep questions till the end of the presentation. So please, if you have questions, I suggest that you save them till after the presentation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you have. We are in Poland. We have time, so feel free for your presentation. It will be not too long for sure. And I would like also send best wishes to a previous chief of Polish company HUBBARD POLSKA, Andrzej Rosiński.
Yes, it's good to
Thank
see
you.
him.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see you.
Krzysztof,
Okay.
thanks.
Welcome, Andres.
Okay, welcome.
Thanks.
Okay, so
Okay.
I've prepared a presentation which I will also share with the organizers later on in PDFs. If needed, that can be shared. So no problem with that. I will try to explain a little bit more about the development of slower growing concepts in Europe. What has happened, what's happening at the moment, and after that, of course, we can also still discuss a little bit about that. First, for the people who don't know Hubbard, it's just a quick summary that I joined Hubbard more than 30 years ago in '92. At that time, it was still an American company because it was established by the family Hubbard in 1921. So it's now 102 years old in the northeast of the US. But through some mergers and acquisitions, we now have our headquarters in France. We have the R&D in France and in the US, and we have the production in Europe, US, and Brazil. And we do select and market breeding stock for conventional broilers and for premium chickens. And those genetics of the premium chickens are being selected in France. And this was the previous R&D center of ISA in the past. We merged with ISA in '97. And ISA had the slower growing breeding stock genetics from themselves, but also from Shaver from Canada. So this is the large gene pool that we still maintain, and we actually have extended since. First, when I talk about markets and developments, I always like to go back to school to what I've been taught many years ago is you always have to think, what market are we producing for? And if you look at world level, then of course there's a huge variation in types of production, in types of markets, depending on the development of a country. So you have very low developed countries where you have many small farms, backyard, wet markets, live markets. Then you move to slow industrialization or rapid industrialization, and then post-industrialization. And where we find ourselves in Europe is between the last two. So you see a mix of the last two columns being shown here. And then also something I always liked when I studied was to use and to think according to the Maslow pyramid. Because for me, this explains a lot of the differentiation in markets, where you start at the basis where, first of all, it's very important to have food available at a reasonable price. And then after that comes food safety, convenience, ready to cook. And then at a later stage, when you reach really the higher income markets, then people start to worry about quality and taste, about health for humans and animals, and animal welfare. So this variation you will see within regions, but it's certainly also still within countries, also in Europe, and also within the economic status of a country or region, like we see today with with some difficult economic times as well. And together, this leads to the license to produce, respect for humans, animals, and environment. This is very important in the, I would say, the rich man's world, the countries, the economies which go very quite well. And then, if you look at some traits of these higher or high developed countries, you see that there's less and less relationship to agriculture because there's much less farmers or families involved with farming or who knew farmers. So there's a disconnection to agriculture. You also have to look at what the trend is with the teenagers, because they are the future consumers. So the trends you can see there is also a prediction for future trends in larger volumes when they become older. And we do know that eating meat every day is not everywhere a normal habit anymore, especially again with the higher income or higher societies or students. A lot of them are flexitarians or even vegetarians or vegans. So there's a growing interest in alternative protein sources like lab meat and plant-based meat. But if consumers buy something, what they want good quality for their money. They want to take care about health for humans and animals, good animal welfare, and good environment. And at the same time, what we see is that the pressure and the importance of NGOs, animal welfare associations, is becoming stronger and stronger and more important to try to influence consumer behavior, and if not the consumer, to influence the producers or the retail or food service companies. One of the issues we always have to deal with, and this is often regardless of the level of development, is that consumers are acting differently to what they say as a citizen. They might say, yes, we want the highest animal welfare, we want the best environment, etc., etc. But when they're in the shop, they still might look at the price and buy the cheapest. So that's something you have to deal with as well. And that also brings me to the point that to highlight that it's also very important to explain to the consumers what you are doing and why eventually they might have to pay a little bit more for better animal welfare or better environment or whatever you are trying to sell. In most developed countries, the biggest volume of meat and chicken meat is sold through retailers. And we don't know the final consumer. They say they know because they do a lot of research. So they translate consumer demand to the producers. And they are in fact the decision makers and change makers in the market. So they have a very important role and often also a leading role. And I will show that later on. And we should not forget the growing impact of social media, especially also with the younger generations. So that's the market we are operating in and producing for. Now I will focus more on various premium concepts in Europe. And I first start with Poland because this is, of course, organized by the WPSA Polish branch. And as far as I'm informed, you have conventional production, which is by far the biggest, and there's just a few, a little volume of slow-growing concepts in Poland. There's a few farms producing the Better Life 1 Star, Beter Leven 1 Ster in Dutch, which is a 56-day minimum and a winter garden, like we have in the Netherlands. I will explain that later on as well. So there's a very small volume of production in Poland for the Dutch market. Then you have a farm type chicken and you have a farm type chicken organic, bio. But in volume and percentage, this is very, very small compared to the total production in Poland, which is mainly focusing on conventional. Then if you look at the European Union, there are official market regulations that you can follow. And if you follow them, then you are allowed to use certain names for certain products. And this is also written down in this market regulation. And for each different country and language, it's written down which words you are allowed to use. So here I show it in English, but you have them in Dutch, in Polish, in German, French, everything. So the first regulation, marketing regulation within this directive is fat off. So this can be a corn-fed chicken or something else. And then you have to feed a minimum percentage of maize to be allowed to call it a corn-fed chicken, maize-fed chicken. For the rest, there's no other regulations for that. And then you get regulations based on minimum age, so 56 days or 81 days. And within that, you have 56-day extensive indoor in English. In Dutch, it's called scharrel, which sounds very good because it's translated in English like roaming, scratching, walking around. So that has a very positive meaning. The same with eggs. Barn eggs in Dutch are also scharreleieren. And then you have 56-day free range. And for 81 days, it's traditional free range or total freedom free range. But I must say the last one is hardly ever used in Europe. So these names you are allowed to use as long as you follow the regulations written down in this directive. And some people do something else, do something themselves. So what kind of main premium concepts do we see in Europe today? So I've mentioned, if I go from the bottom to the top, I've mentioned 81-day free range, which is pretty similar to the Labour system in France. Actually, the European Union, I always say, copied what was more or less done in France. So they more or less copied the Labour system into the 81-day free range system. And then you have organic, which is a different directive. And the minimum age is a minimum of 70 days. But it could also be without a minimum age as long as you use day-old chicks from organic parent stock. And this is becoming more and more important because it's being demanded by the EU now. Then, as I mentioned, 56-day free range. So you have a minimum age. That's the most important. And then you have other systems like extensive indoor, which normally also describes a minimum age, describes a reduced stocking density, and sometimes a maximum average daily gain growth rate. And then on top of that, you have indoor certified, for example, BCC or ECC, Better Chicken Commitment, European Chicken Commitment, which I'll explain in more detail later, which is based on reduced stocking density, the use of a slower growing breed according to a breed list, but there's no restriction on average daily gain and there's no minimum age. So from the bottom to the top, as you can see, you also see that the growth rate demanded or the growth rate by the genetics is going up from very slow growth to slower growth. And what is very important is that you use the right breed and feed for this type of concepts being mentioned. Well, if we look to what was decided in the marketing terms in Europe in the 90s, then you can see with the minimum age of 56 days and the current developments in conventional broilers that the gap in age for the same body weight is becoming bigger and bigger. And this will still continue because we know what is in the pipeline. We know with competitors what is in the pipeline. And on average, you can say that for the same body weight, conventional broilers will still need half a day per year less for the same body weight. So in 5 years' time, it will be 2.5 days less compared to what it is today, which means that this gap is becoming bigger and bigger, which also gives more room for new developments like BCC or ECC, which, as I mentioned, doesn't have a minimum age or a maximum growth rate. And it also gives room for some new developments of new breeds. So Well, I know now that there's some people from the Netherlands. I didn't know that beforehand, but I wanted to share some of the developments in the Netherlands because that's a very special case compared to all the other countries in the world, and we will not see anything else like this in any other country in the world. But I think it's good to explain it a little bit, also because of the relationship between the Netherlands and Poland. Poland partly producing for the Dutch market, and also having this system on a few farms in Poland. So I want to go back to the origin and the development of the Beter Leven 1-star, Better Life 1-star system. And then we go back already 23 years ago. I was personally involved in this development when we initiated ourselves some research done with Speldehold, which you can say now it's part of Wageningen University. It was a practical research center. We did research with several slow-growing breeds, and then after that, and this was based on on a report from the government, the Dutch government, to look more into a farmer's chicken, and then a project was established between HUBBARD, Koppens Feed Mill, the Animal Welfare Association, Speldehold again, and two retailers, Albert Heijn and Jumbo, the number 1 and 2. To develop a new farmer's concept. And on the right, you see the picture where we signed the first agreement to produce 10,000 chickens per week in 2006, which was the outcome of this, and where after we had defined the production system. This production system then in 2007 was adopted by the Animal Welfare Association in their new concept called Beter Leven, Better Life. And they have 3 stars, 1, 2, and 3 stars. And this concept was given 1 star. 3 stars is organic, 2 stars is 56-day free range. And it's not only for broiler meat, it's also for eggs and for milk and for beef and for pork meat and veal, etc. Turkeys now. So if we look at the definition of the Better Life 1-star concept, this is actually based on the 56-day indoor, so the EU regulation that I showed before, the marketing term, but with additions. So the initial idea from the Animal Welfare Association in 2003-04, when we were looking at the project, was to have 56-day free-range chickens. But in 2003, we had the first enormous case of AI, which was huge because 40% of the whole poultry population in the Netherlands was gone, was depleted by AI or as precaution. And in the working group, we said, please, no free range. We don't want free range. It's a too high risk for disease. Look at what happened last year in 2003. So we agree with the concept of 56 days, with indoor as well. And as a intermediate solution, we agreed as a compromise to have a covered range, so a winter garden. And this was a system we copied more or less from what we had seen already in Switzerland. It was not totally new, but we adopted it and added this to this EU marketing term. It also needs to have windows. 3% of the floor surface has to have windows in the roof or in the sides, in the walls. You need to have the pop holes, of course, to go to the covered range. You need to have 2 straw bales, and you need to give 2 grams per day of scratch grain on the floor. On the left, you see a new building. Initially, there were old buildings, but this was a newer building built already in 2006, about 10 years ago, I think. On the left side is the inside of the house. On the right side, you see the covered range, but it's within the structure of the roof. That's how it's being built nowadays in the Dutch market when new farms are built. Just the outside wall on the right is moved to the left. The outside area, so the covered range, needs to have a concrete floor, it needs to have insulated roof, and it needs to have fresh air. So on the right, it's wire mesh, so it's fresh air going through, and you cannot have water, feed, or heating inside. So it's more like an outdoor area. And it needs to be at least 20% of the indoor floor surface. That's the minimum requirement. So that was the development of that system in 2007. Then we had another development in 2014, where all the retailers together decided to move away from conventional broilers to slow-growing broilers, and they call this the Chicken of Tomorrow project. And at the end, we saw two main systems in volume. The first one was the new Albert Heijn chicken, AH. Albert Heijn is the #1 supermarket with 35-36% market share. And Jumbo, the #2 supermarket with 21% market share. And they called it the new standard chicken. Initially, the Chicken of Tomorrow was defined as done by Albert Heijn, which meant we moved from 42 kilograms to 38 kilograms, a minimum age of 45 days, average daily gain not more than 50 grams, and use of straw bales. No natural light was needed. Then Jumbo defined their own program, and they said we go to 30 kilograms. We want minimum 49 days, maximum 45 grams. We want to have the straw bales, but we also want to have the windows and the 2 grams of scratch grain. So you can say that this was more or less very close to the Better Life 1 star. The only thing that was missing was 7 days in age and the covered range. Those two systems were introduced by Albert Heijn and Jumbo in 2014, where initially the retailer said latest in 2020 we will introduce this, but they were already 6 years ahead. And then after that, all the other retailers followed. So how does this look if you look at the retail market, at the development? So there was a period, let's say between 2007 and 2013, where there was only Better Life 1 star and conventional. And the system grew from nothing to about 5-6%. Then when the Chicken of Tomorrow was introduced in 2014, initially by Albert Heijn and Jumbo, and later on the others, by 2017, all the retailers had only slow-growing concepts, whether this was Chicken of Tomorrow in red or partly Better Life 1 star, which at that time grew to about 20% in 2017 and 80% Chicken of Tomorrow. And because of this volume, for 100% of the retail volume, which is the biggest volume for consumption in the Netherlands, in 2017, about 40% of the broiler farms were growing slower growing broilers, one of the two systems. And in volume, this was about 1/3, because there were also some smaller farms involved. So a big change till 2017. But then 2 years ago, all the retailers decided to move to 100% Better Life 1 star, latest in 2023. Again, this was initiated by Albert Heijn. Then all the others followed gradually. And Jumbo was the first to introduce it in September last year, fully. Albert Heijn in October last year, fully. And now the others are following. And by the end of this year, it will be 100% or nearly 100% for all the retailers. So you can see that the blue, the Better Life 1 star, is growing enormously towards 100% the end of this year, which means that there will be more farms needed because slower growth, and also longer, less cycles per year because they live at least 56 days, and lower stocking density, 25 kilograms per square meter. So the number of farms needed is also bigger. So this will be more than 50%. We don't know the exact figure, but it will be at least more than 50%. And then another possibility, but it's not happening at the moment, not yet, is that the number of farms with slower growing concepts could further increase if other farms might move from conventional to producing ECC chickens for fast food service in the Netherlands or for export, for example, to the UK or France. So this is the example in the Netherlands, very, very special and very unique, I would say. Then on a larger scale, I will highlight the European Chicken Commitment. So what is the background of the European Chicken Commitment? It started in 2017 when it was still called the Broiler Ask, but then later was renamed to the European Chicken Commitment. And in parallel, you see something similar called the Better Chicken Commitment in the US and Canada in 2018. The main focus is using specific breeds that have to meet specified welfare outcome scores, lower stocking density, 30 kilograms, and improved enrichment. Improved and enriched environment, sorry. So who are behind this? Behind this are those 37 animal welfare associations. Initially, there were around 20 in 2017, but later on, many more have joined, and you can see they are either national or they are regional or they are global. And also you see the ones from Poland, you see the Arbeitsschweizer Stiftung, you see the, where did I see them? I saw the other one, Otwarte Klatki, or Open Cages. So those are behind this, and they are all organized in Eurogroup for Animals, which you see on the left, which is a pan-European association where all the animal welfare associations are being associated to. So they are the Brussels office to influence the politics, the politicians in Brussels. You don't see the Dutch Animal Welfare Association in here because the 56-day Better Life 1 Star has a higher standard than the Better Chicken Commitment, European Chicken Commitment with 30 kilograms and no minimum age or maximum growth. So that's why they have not underwritten this initiative. So what are the basic principles for the European Chicken Commitment? First of all is to fully implement this by latest 2026, so 3 years from now. Of course, you have to comply with the EU animal welfare laws and regulations. Then the highlights are a maximum of 30 kilograms per square meter. You can thin once, but it's discouraged. You need to use breeds that are on the breed list with higher welfare outcomes. So and you have to follow the RSPCA broiler breed welfare assessment protocol if you want to have your breed on that list, which is very demanding. And then on the environmental standards, at least 50 lux of light, so not 20 like in the European legislation, but 50, including natural light, like the Dutch system, so 3% of the floor surface. 2 meters of usable perch space, which can also be platforms. It's not written in detail, but there is information available from the NGOs that you're also allowed to use platforms. And 2 packing substrates per 1,000 birds, and you are not allowed to use cages or multi-tier systems. And the other point is gas stunning, so gas stunning to avoid that there is live inversion of the birds, so that they are not hung live on the processing line. And then, of course, it needs to be audited by a third party. The second last point, the stunning, is for some countries, some companies, really a hurdle to start working according to BCC, because it's a high investment to change from electrical stunning to gas stunning. So actually what the NGOs are saying, okay, if this is really a hurdle, you can start and we will work together with you to try to find a solution in the future. And this is written down on their website as well. You see the hyperlink in the top. And that's what I said. In fact, they say, please start, and together we will do research and try to find a solution. Although I hesitate to say that there will be a solution by 2026, but I think they are, and they need to be flexible in this requirement, because otherwise it will be a big blockage to go into the BCC, ECC. If you look at the developments, first of all, is of course commitment to this change. So who have made the commitments to this change? You see a graph. So you see from 2018 till now, it grew from nothing to 355 commitments today. So there's still a gradual growth. Even the last year, it continues to grow. And here I just put some logos of companies to show you what kind of companies have committed. It's not the full list, but at least it gives you some idea about fast food chains, about retailers, 2 retailers in the UK, all the retailers in France. In the UK, it's M&S and Waitrose, and also some other food companies that have committed, and also some producers that have committed in some way or another. If you want to see it, you can click on the picture, or you can go to this website here, and you will be able to check by country which companies have committed for the broiler BCC. So if I summarize this, we can say that there are several large global food service companies, and they might have committed regionally. Sometimes they've committed only for a country or for Northern or Northwest Europe. As I said, 2 UK retailers, all the French retailers, and then other countries are following as well. On the right, you see the summary of the commitments by country. They can overlap. If there's a commitment for Northwest Europe, of course, this is double counted, but this is at least by country. If you select a country, and UK is leading by far since the beginning, followed by France, but then you see Germany, Sweden, Spain, and then Belgium, the Netherlands, and also Poland, 25 commitments. And of course, the first focus will clearly be on fresh products, because that's how to compete within such markets with a high animal welfare. That you have to produce regionally and not to have any competition from outside the EU. But there is also a market for frozen or cooked products. Think about the food service and fast food companies that are already importing from Thailand or Brazil. So if you look at the 2 countries with the highest level of commitments, UK and France, both countries are big importing countries for broiler meat already. They don't produce enough for what they consume. This is nearly half of what they consume is being imported. So if they will implement the commitments, and there will be more local production of slower growing breeds, this means slower growth, higher ages, lower stocking density, which again means less production from local farms, from national farms, unless they can build new farms, which is not easy in the UK, which is not easy in France. So it would mean that at the same level of consumption, they will need more meat to be imported, which, okay, it's a pity for them. But on the other hand, it's also a good opportunity for countries like the Netherlands and Poland, who are the 2 main exporters of broiler meat. And this could mean that a BCC, ECC type production in the Netherlands and Poland could be established for export markets, because we are, Poland and the Netherlands, already exporting a lot to France and to the UK. So part of that might be replaced by ECC production. And nevertheless, even if we don't like it, we have to realize that also Thailand or Brazil sooner or later will start to produce some kind of, they will have to produce some BCC or ECC type production, chicken meat, because in the supply chain, food service companies that buy already frozen or cooked products from Thailand or Brazil don't want to change that supply chain. They want to continue with their suppliers, and they will demand suppliers from Thailand or Brazil to change their production or part of the production to BCC, ECC. This is already being demanded. The Thai producers know what BCC means. They know what they have to do, but it's still not happening. And Brazil is more behind in knowing exactly what they have to do, I would say. Some examples of implementations, because commitments is nice, but most important, of course, is the implementation, is also the planning of the implementations. A good example is Rema 1000 in Norway. This is a supermarket chain who owns the full production chain. So they own Norskilling as an integration. And since last year, they are now fully compliant with the BCC, and they produce 100% slow growing since the last quarter last year, according to BCC. There is a case study about it. You can click on the link at the bottom. This is an older case study, but it describes on what they have done to introduce slow growing. Then in the UK, the main example at the moment of implementation is the supermarket Marks and Spencer, who was one of the first to commit and is the first to implement. They announced this in the summer of 2021 that they were going to implement, and last year, September, they did 100%, and they are selling this under the name Oakham Gold. Then on the producer side, you have two sisters operating in the UK, in the Netherlands, and in Poland, and they have committed to produce chickens according to this standard. They are also the supplier to M&S, so they have changed part of their production to according to M&S. They are producing for supermarkets in the Netherlands according to the Better Life 1 star, which falls within BCC, you can say, but it's a higher level. And this is a statement of last year, October, where they made a press release themselves to say that they are now producing more than 2 million higher welfare broilers every week, which is about 20% of their total production. Then Galliance, another producer in France, have also made a statement. They are not producing 100% according to BCC, but they are changing their nouvelle agriculture, the new agriculture concept towards BCC as well in 2024 by. They already did everything except the breed, but they will change the breed by the end of this year. And also 50% of their chicken production will comply with BCC by 2026. Then another example in Belgium. Nothing was really happening in Belgium till 2021. When Colruyt supermarket made an announcement that they were committing to BCC in 2026, and then in June last year they introduced their slow growing BCC chicken, and other retailers are following in commitments. They already followed in 2021, and they are gradually introducing some slow growing, but Colruyt is leading with a certain percentage. They are not 100%. They are just adding another tier to their range at the moment, but the objective is to move 100% by 2026. Then I mentioned the NGOs. The NGOs are very active, remain to be very active to push producers, to push food companies and retailers to commit and to implement. And one of the things that Compassion in World Farming, a global NGO, is doing is, since last year, they are making a chicken track report. They do this in the US and they do this for Europe. If you click on the picture on the left, you will be able to download the report. This was published only recently in April, where it's the first report where 73 commitments by 60 European companies have been looked at, and they are describing the percentage on what is being implemented or not being implemented and how many companies are not reporting. So that's, in this way, they try to put pressure on the food companies and producers and retailers. Another example is Humane League. They also keep pushing, especially retailers in the UK, but they were also pushing some producers retailers in Germany, in Spain, in Italy. So there's several NGOs that are trying to put pressure on the retailers to make a move by attacking them individually, something that was also done in the Netherlands in the past. And they're trying to mimic, copy this way of working a little bit. Then with these developments, with these commitments, which is huge if it will be implemented, the question is, how can you best respond to it? Because you have to move, you have to change from conventional to slow growing. So what is very important, I mentioned it before already, is that make sure that the genetics match the concept. First, describe the concept, which for ECC is very clear. But if you do another concept, think about what kind of housing, what kind of husbandry practices and enrichments, etc. What kind of nutrition, and then look at what kind of breed to use. Because I've seen many examples where people didn't want to change the genetics, preferably use conventional. But when you move to a slower growing concept using conventional, it fails. I've seen so many failures. It doesn't match, it doesn't fit. So, but anyway, also within slow growing, you have to look at the genetics to make the best match. So I can, of course, only speak for ourselves. I cannot speak for others, but to be able to respond to this, and this is based on 55 years, more than 55 years of experience and genetics that we have, initially for the Labour Rouge market in France. So we have a lot of different breed of females. We have this very slow growth males that you can see here. So those can be used for Labour Rouge. But we also have slow growth colored males, which grow slightly faster with better feed conversion and a little bit more meat for the intermediate markets. Those are more the traditional markets, the backyard markets, the dual purpose markets, which you can see in France and Southern Europe, Eastern Europe. And then you can see the combination which was made since the 90s in France first, and then we introduced it in the UK in the late 90s, early 2000, combining our conventional males with a slower growing female. And so you have all the good traits from animal welfare and productivity of the breeder from the female side, and you have all the efficiency from the male side. And with that, you have a very good intermediate solution for markets looking for good animal welfare, but still also a good efficiency. Then I'm sorry, but I have to mention this because it's not often that a new breed is being developed, but based on the BCC ECC market, where there's no minimum age, where there's no maximum growth rate, but you need to comply with animal welfare outcome traits. We have developed a new breed of female, which we call the Redbro, which is completely new. It was introduced 2 years ago, sorry. And it's filling the gap between the J787 and conventional broilers. But it has similar welfare characteristics, but gives a better balance on environment and economic sustainability. And we have done trials in UK and France. It has been accredited in 2021 by the ECC, by the BCC in the US as well, by the RSPCA Assured and Red Tractor. So that was very important for us. And since then, several countries and companies have started to place the Redbro. So if you look at the BCC ECC, the main crosses being looked at is the J757, J787, and the Redbro. So the combination of 3 different females, slow growing females, with the conventional male. And all of them have been accredited for the BCC and also for national programs like the RSPCA Assured and also the Red Tractor Enhanced Welfare in the UK. On top of that, you can see some of the other breeds like the Norfolk Black, and also all Labour Rouge crosses are automatically being accredited for BCC as long as they are on the list of the Labour Rouge crosses and produced according to the Labour Rouge stipulations. If you look at those 3 main crosses, so the J757, 787, and the Redbro, they look similar. They are predominantly white, sometimes a little bit brown in between, but mostly white. And what our experience is that color, feather color is not the most important if you look at the bigger volume markets. The BCC type market in Northwest Europe already, these are the crosses used most and are the most important for BCC type markets because feather color normally comes with higher feed conversion, slower growth and less meat. So that's why you mostly see this combination between conventional males and slower growing females. The differentiation between the three is average daily gain, feed conversion and yields. Then something that comes into discussions very often is, okay, moving to higher animal welfare, that's fine, perfectly fine, but what about sustainability? So that's why I've also added some slides on this. And before I start talking about sustainability, I would like to describe what is the definition of sustainability. Because very often people talk about sustainability, but actually they mean carbon footprint, environment, which is not correct. When we talk about sustainability, we talk about the three pillars, the three circles: economics, social, and environment. And it's the best balance between those three. So, and this balance is different for each country, for each company, and for each individual, because everybody will put the emphasis in one of the other three circles differently to another person or company or country. So it means according to those actually the needs and definition of sustainability, or the emphasis within sustainability, it means that you have to look for different solutions for different markets. There's not one solution because there's not one fitted all. And then if using that description, I would like to highlight that first of all, we have to produce what the market is asking for, what the consumer is asking for. That's how I started. So look at what the market is asking for and then look at what you have to produce. Because if you don't produce what the consumer is asking for, you produce waste. And if you produce waste, by definition, you produce, it's the least sustainable because you produce something that is not right for the market. Then if you look at these three pillars, the three circles, on the left, if you look at environment, it's clear that on a breeder stock level, parent stock level, those slow-growing females produce a lot of hatching eggs and a lot of chicks, more than conventional, and they need less feed. So it's the highest sustainability in all the ways you can think of because they need less feed per chick produced. However, the feed consumption per broiler is always higher. It's always higher because they live longer. The longer you live, the more feed you need for maintenance. That's mathematics, so it's physics. You cannot change that. Feed conversion for broilers, slow-growing growers, will always be higher than for conventional broilers. On the other hand, you can look at other things like the litter is drier, which means less production of manure. There's less antibiotics in the production chain and environment. And if you look at the economy, the production costs are higher. Yes, absolutely. Higher feed, lower stocking. It's not all genetics, it's also the concept. So lower stocking density, need for windows, enrichments, etc. So you can consider them or market them as added value. That's the way we should look at it. Then on top of that, those are the good things. Livability of the parent stock and the broilers is very good. There's less rejects, there's less bee quality, and there's better meat quality. So those are positives. And then if you look to the social, that's the easiest part. It's clear that there's minimized or no antibiotics used. The proudness to raise chickens. So farmers are really proud again to show what they are doing. Most of them would never want to go back as long as they earn the same amount of money. It's also easy to find third-party labor from outside, and new generations are also open to continue the farm, where sometimes they say, I don't want it anymore. Now they want to continue with it. Animal welfare, there's a lot of reports about that there is a difference and animal welfare is at a higher level. You also maintain a higher genetic diversity because there's a lot of other breeds being involved, and it's very easy to communicate and to show to the society what you're doing. But on top of that, when you start, what is very important for the sustainability is that you make use of the whole carcass. You need to have a better balanced use of the broilers, the whole carcass, because if you don't sell it at the local market at a higher price with a higher cost, then you will have to sell it at market prices for conventional, and that means you lose money and you have to get higher prices for the parts you sell locally. So that means also better economics for the whole chain if you have a better use of the whole carcass, and it also means less transport of unwanted products, which is additional cost and also additional carbon footprint. So what can we do on R&D? Feed is the most important element in cost and in carbon footprint. So a lot of people think that R&D for slow-growing chickens is very simple. We don't have to do anything, but we do a lot. We use exactly the same R&D tools and selection pressure as we do for conventional. We use the same techniques, modern techniques like CT scanner, like live feed conversion, which you see at the bottom, using feed stations, parental assignments, DNA. We get the DNA of all the chicks born, so we know exactly which family is which. We place the birds close to field conditions, so we can see how they perform under very good conditions and under not good conditions, and we see the interaction between that. So also for slow-growing breeds, we put a lot of pressure, and as I said, feed conversion is also being looked at very, very heavily, and there's enough variation in slower-growing breeds to see continuous improvement. So we keep working on feed efficiency, robustness, growth rate only in conventional broilers, of course, the meat yields, the quality, productivity of the parents, the fertility of the males, and also the ability to adapt to diverse conditions. I mentioned feed being the number one element for cost and carbon footprint. And I'm not going into all the details of sustainability and carbon footprint of feed because I could talk for another day, and I've got a colleague who knows even much more about it. But what is very clear, and there's a report about it in the Greenwell project in the Netherlands, showing also that the land use chains of the ingredients used is really a very, very important factor. So this is a very important factor within the whole magnitude or the whole sustainability of the feed. Problem is that there's not one system, not one model standardized that everybody is using. So it's very difficult to compare figures between countries and companies because everybody might use another model, another system to calculate. So there is a need for standardization. But what is very clear is that the relative increases in feed carbon footprint per kilogram of broiler for changes due to land use chains and ingredients is greater than for changes in animal welfare systems. And this is written in this Greenwell report that has been published last year. Something more about feed, what you could look at. So there's a lot of things still to be looked at to optimize. Is first of all, know more about the needs of protein, amino acids, and with that also the cost of production for slower growing breeds. So this can be further optimized and reduce the carbon footprint and reduce cost. Look at alternative ingredients, protein sources. Think about local sourcing of ingredients. Try to get rid of soya or EU soya, or at least non-land use chain soya. Use of insects, I put a question mark because it's still in the infancy and there's still a lot of discussion about it, if it will be practical. And also what can you use as ingredients for the insects, and is that allowed for as ingredient then for animals? The use of processed animal protein, which is allowed again by the EU. This would be the cheapest and most sustainable source of protein if companies would start to use this again, but then retailers and food companies will have to allow it, and feed mills need to have the logistics right to keep it separate in the feed mills. So that's one of the hurdles. More use of synthetic amino acids, so you can reduce the cost and look at alternative ingredients. Optimization of nutrient density, especially the level of protein and energy, still to look at for slow growing. And as I said, also to look at the system's impact, what kind of models are being used, and we should focus on standardization of systems. Then research. Unfortunately, there's still relatively little known about the real needs of slower growing broilers. Until recently, most of the research was always done on conventional broilers. And therefore, we are actively participating in various research projects, of course, in France, in the UK, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, with Wageningen University. And as some examples of research we have done and are doing with Wageningen is healthy bones, where we looked at the bone strength, nutrition, enrichment. Slow growth broilers, number 1, which was followed by number 2. And number 1, we looked at behavior, nutrition, health, environment, quality. Number 2, we are focusing 100% on Better Life 1 star. And we are also involved in function light, looking at the need and presence of light intensity and light composition for conventional and slower growing breeds. And you do see a difference between conventional and slow growing breeds. So this has never been looked at before. Very interesting. Another point I mentioned in the sustainability picture is the use of the whole carcass. And I took this example from the Netherlands, where before it was mainly breast meat. Now we can see in the Netherlands, in the retail shops, a lot of other products like deboned breast meat, of course, but also a product gaining popularity, deboned thighs or thighs with bone in, but also marinated products, mincemeat, sausages. We never had them in the Netherlands before, burgers, schnitzels, deli meat for on the sandwiches, salads, soups. So there's a lot of ways of doing it to use the whole carcass. And those are pictures taken in the supermarkets to show this. Then another point I mentioned and I'm highlighting here is an example from the Netherlands and the use of antibiotics. And you see it has been registered separately between conventional and slower growing concepts in the Netherlands. You see the daily exposure of antibiotics. You see it has gone down from conventional from 2014 to 2022. It has gone down for slower growth, but the difference is always there. And at the moment, it's nearly 10% of the use in conventional broilers. There has been a huge step made already in general for conventional and for slow growth since 2009, when the Dutch government made an objective to reduce it by 70%. And this has been reached by far. But there is clearly a difference also between the concepts and also the percentage of flocks being treated. In the Netherlands last year was only 3% of the flocks being treated for slower growing concepts last year. So looking at all of this, I just come back to the red bro, because when you talk about BCC, for me, you talk about red bro, because it has the best balance between social, economics, and environment, but maintaining the animal welfare outcomes like the 787, which means it has improved feed conversion, it has faster growth, it has therefore lower carbon footprint, lower land use, and it's more economically viable. So it does give an opportunity to introduce the ECC without an extreme high cost or extreme higher carbon footprint, and still work can be done on what I showed on the feed use, the nutrition, and the research to be done. The last slide is what is very important when you look at concepts is to think differently. It's no longer the supply chain model, the old model from the top from the bottom to the top, or from the top to the bottom when you look at what is being demanded. It is really moving to a new model where everybody needs to work together. All the shackles need to work together to make it work and to make it a success, and to have the feedback and working together from breeder to the market chain, the sales chain, and within the supply chain as well. So for sure, it's not an end yet. It will continue. We don't know exactly when companies will start to further implement or how many will further commit, but for sure something has started and it will be done, but we don't know exactly how and when and on which level yet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for very nice presentation. I am more than happy to hear this impressive job you did within last 20 years in your country and other West European countries. As you mentioned before, we, Poland, we are the first poultry meat producer in the European Union, and we see long road ahead. But as an explanation, small explanation for this case in Poland, we are the younger member of European community. So yeah, but I see here in your country the complete model. So you started with a very nice model, and yeah, you went with this in the practice. So we have to learn from this, and I hope in the future we will go step by step in this direction too. Okay, so I am opening a discussion now for our participants. Please, we invite you to questions.
Okay, maybe I will start. Paul, thanks for your very interesting presentation, which gives us a better view of slower growing concepts in Europe, and also concerning the market and the production. I have one question concerning R&D. Currently, do you still use some meat quality traits or as a traits on R&D, or do you take into account the R&D take into account the meat quality traits as well?
Yes. So if you look at the wooden breast or white striping or spaghetti meat, this is being looked at on R&D as well. But I must say that the level of meat quality issues in slow growing is close to zero or hardly existing. So there is a big difference there. But it is part of the traits, yes.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Maybe it will be good also to present or some symposia to show this information. You know that in Krakow this year it will be a European poultry meat symposium. So I think that
meat and egg quality.
Excuse me?
Meat and egg quality.
Yes, but I would like to point out
of
all the meat quality, because we are speaking about the meat.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that it will be also a good opportunity to give some information about the difference or good quality of the slower growing bird's meat production. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Paul, I will send you the information about this symposium in Krakow in September.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have another questions? I have one question regarding slow-growing poults. Now I received a question to perform a study with slow-growing broilers from a company from your region, and could you tell me where I can buy the poults? Could you give me the name of hatchery in Poland?
You need hatching eggs, broiler chicks or broiler hatching eggs?
Yeah. I need the 1 day poults, slow growing.
Yeah, the broilers.
The broilers.
Yeah. Depends which breed you need. Because
Okay.
as you've seen, we have a lot of different breeds. Depends on what kind of system are you looking at, what kind of concept, and then we can define which breed would suit best, and then we can find the hatchery accordingly.
Okay, so maybe I will write you.
No problem. Yes, I must say
on brief, yeah.
Yeah, we
Good.
do this quite often. We get questions like this. So
Good.
very important is what is the target of the research or for what
course.
concept, and then we know the breed, and then we can find the
Good.
hatchery to supply.
Good. Thank you. Another questions? Is it not the case? We can probably go to the finish to finalize this meeting. Paul, thank you again for the nice presentation. It was not boring. It was very interesting, especially for people from Poland. And thank you again.
Okay, and thank you for the invitation, for the opportunity for this presentation. And I always like to come to Poland. In the past, traveled a lot with Andres, so I know Poland quite well. And I would also say dziękuję bardzo.
Proszę bardzo. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. That was for this evening. Yeah. Thank you for your participation, and till the next time.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.